Technical difficulties, technical challenges, technical difficulties, technical challenges, technical difficulties, technical challenges, technical difficulties, technical challenges, uh, 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 technical difficulties, technical difficulties, technical difficulties. The audio's going and the Obi.
After your decisions and your actions.
Are we hearing anything? Mimi, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You can hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, great, 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 great. We've been having some technical difficulties, but
It was a
I think we
really
can
good
finally get
song.
started.
It was a
Alvin's
really
on the phone. Hang on.
I like your song.
Shit, no, it's not. Um, yeah, goodness. Yes. It's rough. It is rough. We'll fix it in post. Thank God niggas don't read. Where'd your mask go? Yeah, niggas don't read books, so nobody can look. Oh, whoops. We'll fix it in post. Okay, content page. Okay. We've had a lot of technical challenges, but we're finally starting. So, hello everyone, and welcome to another installment of Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. My name is Chinyelu. I will be one of our conversation facilitators today. I'm joined by my good friends Khalid, Alvin, and Jay Rue on the second floor of the Alchemy Community Wealth Building Center. And today we're going to be getting into a book discussion of The Knowledge Illusion by, uh, I have it, I have it, The Knowledge Illusion by Stephen Sloman and Philip Fernbach. Um, yeah, and so we'll get into a little bit more in detail about what that book is about, and discuss some of the points within it. But first, as always, we got to get started with our check-in ritual. For those of you who are maybe watching the recording of this or watching the live stream, watching the live stream who may not be familiar with the way we get down here at the Kepler Institute. We like to start all of our community gatherings with a check-in question, and that is a practice that we hold just so that we can make sure that we are, maintaining an awareness of each other, of where everybody's at, and that we are, basically being people centered and relationships first, everything that we do. So, typically, what that looks like is we do a number and a color. that are both supposed to kind of represent how you're feeling at that moment. And then we'll have a sort of an icebreaker question as well to get to know each other on a little bit of a deeper level. So um, maybe our check-in question for today could be. Um, I always like to think of something that's maybe related to the topic of discussion. So, um, uh, okay, yeah. So maybe let's do what would you consider uh what would you consider an area of expertise? A personal area of expertise. What's something for you that you feel like you have, a lot of knowledge on, or a large sort of familiar base of familiarity with it, if that makes sense. Does anybody want to start us off for the check-in today? Khalid chooses Tara, so.
All right. I'm over here like trying to think about my answer, but I'm feeling like an orange 8. And honestly, I don't feel like I'm an expert in anything. But um and I don't know, maybe that's just like doubting my own knowledge and stuff. Like I just feel very new and like I guess I'm just always like I feel like there's a lot to learn, so it's like hard for me to say that I'm an expert in anything. Um, but if I had to choose something, I guess that I feel comfortable speaking on, it would be like emotions and how they show up maybe in our bodies and how we communicate them to like outside of ourselves and stuff and how what we do and like to what we eat, what like how we move throughout the world, how we exercise and stuff like impacts those emotions. So I will pass it to who's on here. I'll pass it to Mimi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, come a little bit closer. You're a little quiet.
Okay, maybe because I'm going through my speech. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What up, y'all? I'm feeling like an indigo purple 7.9. And yeah, I don't know. The word expert is kind of loaded, but something I put a lot of hours into. Uh, lived in practice for a while. I would say is accountability, like how to practice personal accountability, and also like um, holding others accountable in your community. And I will have to sing.
Yeah, what's up, y'all? I'm feeling like a forest green 7 right now. And yeah, definitely agree. I tried not to use the word expert in the actual in the question just because like, yeah, um man, who is an expert at anything, right? But I definitely do feel like I feel comfortable speaking on. I've put a lot of time into and work into learning about storytelling, just through a variety of different mediums. And actually, storytelling is I think it's probably going to come up a little bit today, just during our conversation on knowledge. So, yeah. So I would say storytelling for myself, and I'll pass it to Khaled.
Hey guys, I'm called here, Um, my number for today is 10. My color, mm, I say a teal. And what was the
What's something that you consider yourself knowledgeable about?
uh mm, Probably like figuring out with technology or like games, stuff like that. I'll pass it to. Is Kipper Institution just M? Okay. I'll pass it to M. That's all right.
Hey everybody, color is teal, numbers 8.8. And in the spirit of the book that we're reading, The Knowledge Illusion, I'm an expert in all the things you guys are expert in. My personal um, sauce would probably be more in the storytelling lane, with a lot of emphasis on uh, being a good hater, master hater. You know. Pass it back inside.
Yeah, I'm feeling spiritually like a 10. In terms of my patience, like a 2. Technology, man. I thought I was an expert, but I was wrong. But thankfully, and we'll get into it later. Thankfully, the internet exists. Sometimes it doesn't always provide what you need, but it's a good resource. If there was something I would consider myself an expert in, it would be being me. There's nobody who does J. Rue better than J. Rue. And speaking of doing J. Rue, I'll pass it out.
Hello, Alvin here, Kepler Institute. I'm feeling like an 8 lasagna color because we're making lasagnas. And I'm also an expert on all the things Alvin, good, bad, and the ugly. In reflection with the Tao Te Ching, says, knowing others is intelligence, knowing oneself is true strength. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. I was just poking fun at Alvin for also being a Dow expert. Because this man has a Dow quote for literally any situation you find yourself in. He's got the quote.
In fact, there's one on this tea label. Even a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step.
Shout out to Alvin Sang Swangle, our Kepra's resident Taoist. Well, wonderful. Thanks everybody for checking in. Of course, we may have some other folks join us here in the Zoom call or maybe even in the room as the conversation goes on. And if we do, we'll just wait for the natural pauses in the conversation to let them do their check-ins as well. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the discussion. Um, uh, uh, this is a two-part discussion, so I guess what I'm thinking is maybe we'll try to just focus on the first half of the book, just sort of like loosely bouncing around with thoughts and reflections on the first 7 chapters, and then finish it up at the next session. But maybe we could each just start by sort of like summarizing the book. In our own way, sort of like giving our large. Yeah, Kyla's already over here grumbling. Yeah, we definitely got to start with Kyla. I think youngest to oldest makes sense. So I'll go second, man. I'll be right behind you. Um, but yeah, we'll each start with like our summary of the book, and then if anybody on the Zoom call wants to jump in on that as well, we'd love for you guys to do so, and then maybe after that we can just sort of start loosely going through the chapters. So I'll pass it over to Colin.
One thing that I took away from the book was that like people don't. Oh, I'm not gonna say that. um, People don't know as much as they think they know. So like, uh, Alvin was trying to tell me, do you know how to do you know how a toilet works? And I said, yeah. And then he said, how? And I was about to tell him, but I was interrupted. So
Please tell us.
So first you make the toilet with, I'm pretty sure it's a different type of glass. It's not regular glass that you would see like that window over there. Um, and then after it's shaped, I think if I let it cool down, or no. What is it? I saw a document. How?
Not how it's made. How does it work?
Oh, that's right. Oh, I was getting there. How does it work? So, um, let's see. Um, so when you well, I'm not gonna say it's weird. When you use the restroom and you flush, uh, I don't know, there's pipes leading to the toilet, obviously, and when they're pressed, when you press down on the toilet button, I guess that's what you want to call it. Um, how about I don't like how you're staring at me. It's kind of like I know. Um, uh, after you press down on the button, the machine on top, no, not the machine. I don't know some of the words I don't know what to call them. The tools in the toilet. Uh, there's a lever there's a lever that works on the button, so when you pull it down it flushes the toilet and it goes into the what's it called, so you're not just piling up a bunch of your feces and oh. um,
I don't know what happened to that thing.
who's that?
Okay, they just put this one on because I really don't know where it went. Or was it right here? Yep. Okay. Here.
Oh, I don't know who that
Yep,
is.
yep,
I,
yep,
I mean,
yep,
I'm welcome. uh how do you say her name? What is it?
yep.
uh Hello, Cassandra. uh
Hey.
hello.
Oh,
How are you?
pretty good. Oh, I did not know I was not on mute. Sorry.
Oh, it's all right. Do you can you check in, Cassandra?
Let me unmute myself. Okay. Okay, so are we doing like a check-in question or
Uh, yeah, it's what are you highly what is it? Knowledgeable about on something and
highly
numbering things.
knowledgeable? Okay. Um, that's in hmm. I would say music until like I met people that were really like they've been studying music like for like 20 plus years. So then I was like, maybe not. Uh, but I would say reading. I've always pretty much have been reading and I've scored pretty high on reading tests. So I guess maybe like reading. Um, I guess let me see color. I would say like a yellow 10. Yeah, like a yellow 10.
Oh, okay, that's great. I don't want to answer about the toilet anymore. So, um,
Does anyone know how?
Yeah, so uh to Alvin's point, and this is, one of the big examples from the book, um we sort of, and I think that this is also what, Khaled, what you were getting at with your summary. It's most people think that they know more than they do. We tend to be more confident in our knowledge than we actually we we're more confident that we think we know things than we actually know things, if that makes sense. So the example that they used was, they did this study where they asked a bunch of people if they knew how a toilet works, and everybody was sure that they knew how a toilet worked. But then you ask them to go explain how a toilet works, and it's like, oh well, I think there's something on the inside, And then when you flush it, the water goes, but I actually don't know really why the water goes, the physics of it. So, so I think that that's like half the book. Half of it is like talking about the ways that our confidence in our knowledge leads us to tricking ourselves, into taking on projects that we are not equipped to, making assumptions about things that we just are not informed enough about for those assumptions to be accurate. But then I think the other half of the book is talking about how it's like, the solution is not to, uh, just try to learn everything and just stuff as much knowledge in your head as possible. In fact, they talk about the idea that the human brain isn't really even designed for that. The idea, the way that you beat that is by relying on the way the human brain is actually designed to, interact with and store knowledge, which is via the outside world, people, books, observation in the world, and just the idea that all of our knowledge is external when you really get down to it. So yeah, and I'll pass it to I think the next oldest person on the call would be J. Rue. So I'll pass it to J. Rue.
Cool. Yeah, I don't have too much to add as far as like broad stroke summary. Just yeah, people collectively know a lot of things, but us individually know pretty much nothing. And also, the tools that we develop in order to assist us in knowing things. So take like Google or Bing, ChatGPT, nowadays if you're into the AI bit, or even just like books on the shelf, right? Like those are all technologies that human beings had developed in order to know, and continue to know and create community around knowing. But yeah, as Chin was saying, the human brain is not designed to be an encyclopedia. It's designed to help you survive in the world against jaguars and bears and whatever the hell else is out there in the world. You know what I mean? So, uh, we are often, as individuals, we know about as much as it takes to function, and going into any details beyond that is often outside of our individual scopes. And that's why we need to rely on others who, may have the specialized knowledge to fill in that particular detail or that particular detail or that particular detail. And through that collective knowledge and action, we're able to achieve things that none of us would ever be able to even probably imagine on our own. So that's probably my high level overview and takeaway. And I think next up is probably Tara.
Oh, I have not read the book. So, yeah. It is on my reading list, and I was very interested about it based off of what people have said about it. Um, but yeah. So I'll pass it to, is it Mimi next?
Mimi, you there? Mimi, are you there? Yeah, I saw you come off mute, so we know you're there. We can't hear you. Yeah, we see you're unmuted. We still can't hear you. Maybe we could pass to Alvin in the meantime.
Okay, let's see. What other piece do I want to add? The other piece I'll add is the idea of the community of knowledge, which was interesting to me. And that is the idea that uh, our beliefs are not based off of like truth or like facts, but that and this can be in like a discipline field or in a community or in an organization. We have a kind of a through our relationships know have access to certain information, and then oftentimes the beliefs of our group and the information in our group, and this you see this in political polarization all the time, and or like religious beliefs too, that no matter how many facts you present to people, facts, quote unquote, that you present to people, and some of them might actually be scientifically verifiable facts, but our identity is tied to our beliefs. So no matter what kind of, particularly when it's about our membership in a community, believes these things, and people continue to repeat that, that it's very resistant to change. And that unless the community changes or that person individually changes their community, I think they specifically set an example of this um, guy who used to be in more of like I think it was evangelical, like Christian sort of like community, but then started to become more like interested in things like evolution or certain scientific pieces that then led them to leave that community. And that it was really, and it actually was, I think, very like traumatic for them too, because it's like that so much of our identity is tied up in the communities that we're part of and what we believe about the world.
I think one of the things that makes me think about, and then maybe we can kind of just start walking through um, the book sort of more chapter by chapter, but the idea that knowledge is not just about like how we move through the world and understand the world. It's about like how we build relationships as well. Um, and maybe let me speak to that another way. I think it's really it made what the piece that Alvin brought up makes me think about, knowledge as an evolutionary mechanism. I think one of the points in the knowledge illusion that was most interesting to me is this idea that it's the ability to access and share information the way that we do is something that human beings evolved the way that, kangaroos evolved pouches, or birds evolved wings, It is a function of our, you know, um, like genetic and, you know, makeup as like creatures to be able to, survive better, and what Alvin's point made me think about is that like, you know, um, like part of that survival is, yes, your ability to, remember certain skills, know which berries are poisonous and which ones aren't. But it's also about your ability to, humans are inherently communal creatures, like it's about your ability to build relationships and be in community with other human beings, and like problem solve together. And so like that I think the piece with identity comes into play because it's uh what contains your ability to relate to the people around you, And so when you start asking people to change their like fundamental points of view, to change their fundamental understanding of the world, you're almost asking them to change their association, change their community. And from in our evolutionary brain, the part of our brain that's just really focused on like survival, that is unacceptable, to a lot of people, because it's like if you're asking me to put aside all my beliefs and therefore everybody that I know and work with and care for, then how am I gonna take care of myself and feed myself, because we all need our communities to do those things. So, yeah, so that was just one thing that made me think about, but. Maybe we can get into that a little bit more in a second. Is there anything else that anybody wanted to add, just based off of those sort of quick summaries? Any questions that folks might have about the book or about, knowledge itself?
I guess I could, I don't know if it's like a question um per se, but it's just like, especially with the part when they were like, you might think that you know, but you really don't know. And I felt that like And it made me remind me of the time that I was in a room and they were like, yeah, like, if you know a lot about music, you want to talk to other people that know a lot about music, show up. And I did. And just to go in this room and realize that I really didn't know much was just kind of, at first it was very intimidating, but um, it just made me want to work harder. So yeah, I feel like that is such a real thing that we think that we know like everything about a subject until we get around people who know more than we do. And then it's just like we're completely lost. And it made me look at learning in a different way and realize that I mean, there's so much into music that I did not know before. And even though it is a little bit scary to know that I probably won't know everything about that subject, but just striving to know more and knowing that I will never be done with learning is um I feel like it's very intimidating, but it's also very humbling too. And it's I just feel like the humbleness that I felt in that moment was just very powerful. Like I was extremely humbled, and but it gave me a chance to learn, and
Yeah.
I felt like that's what made it like all worthwhile. And I was like, wow, like now I can go back and study more. And also um very true about like how you can give someone all the facts. You can lay them, you can lay all the facts down and everything, and then that if that person's not willing to digest it and take it in and try to apply it to life, it's completely meaningless. Um, I feel like at the end of the day, people only care about what they care about and are passionate about what they're passionate about. And if your rhetoric doesn't fit their way of life, and they're not willing to look out and to learn more, even though like there's plenty of facts that prove that this is wrong, they're never going to change. Like they'll never apply the knowledge, um they'll just stay in that bubble because that's all they know and that's all they want to know. So I feel like that is so powerful because like I it's been plenty of times where I thought that I could educate someone and no. Like it was just they were not having it. Like it was just like um especially such a powerful subject as politics. um yeah, I was talking to a person who was a conservative, and I was like telling them like, hey, no, this, this, that, and the third, and they're just like, and I'm giving them like facts, y'all, like straight out like facts on facts, and they didn't want to hear any of it. They always had a rebuttal. It was, and so like that's what I started learning that like if you can't educate a person that doesn't want to be educated, like it's just not possible. So that was my
I
take on
think,
the book. And you said what?
yeah, I was gonna say I appreciate you bringing up the like political bent of it too, because that's something that is definitely at the forefront of my mind. When I was thinking about just like how we uh build identity around like the knowledge that we have,
Hmm.
and like our individual understandings of the world, and how like amazing that is, but also how volatile that can be and how dangerous that can be. Especially in the age we're in now, like in the information age, information has so much more impact, and like
Hmm.
our access to reality is like, or the reality that we have access to or is often put in front of us through, the internet and stuff like that, is so easily hijacked, and not only like hijackable, but like specifically hijackable. Like they can target you based on your age, your race, your gender, your location, your IP address. Like there's so many
Hmm.
different ways that they can segment you and put you into a space, and then you're just in that bubble now, whether you want to be or not. Or they can target, specific people who might be more apt to take on certain views and stuff like that. And so when I think of a lot of the like disinformation campaigns and things that have gone on like platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, those things scare me a lot because people just become uh, even more like indoctrinated, and it's even easier to do now because you don't even really have to go outside and experience anything for yourself. You can just read about it on a headline on Reddit, and then that gets shoved into your bias box, or carves in that little wrinkle in your brain that tells you, oh yeah, that's correct. And what's the word I'm looking for? It just creates that confirmation bias because you see it all the time on these platforms, even if it doesn't necessarily exist out in reality. It's not something people actually have to experience in order to be impacted by. So yeah, I definitely hear you on the political bit. I think I saw Chin.
Yeah, I think for me, what it makes me think about is like something that they talk about, they spend a lot of time early on in the knowledge illusion, sort of like talking about why that is, like why we process things the way that we do. And, like to your point, Cassandra, the amount of knowledge that we have will always be limited. And not only will it always be limited, but the way that we process it and understand it will always depend on the context as well. So it's like, it's both like how we're taught to process it and understand it, how we're taught to trust different like sources of information, how the new information that we receive like interacts and like sometimes really comes into conflict with like beliefs that we have that are, you know, a little bit more like ingrained. Um, and I think like to me, like what it all comes down to is just like, this idea that because we only ever know in quotation marks what we know, it's like it becomes very hard at a certain point to step beyond that. And I think that like, you know, I think in a lot of ways it's cultural, because some cultures like really embrace that unknown, embrace that like expansion of like, thought and belief. And some cultures tend to be very you know, um, they tend to dig their toes in, they tend to stick to their guns. And I definitely think that there's, room for both and there's reason for both. But, um, our perception is, they talked about like, that all humans really live, at least on an individual level, in a state of, just in a perpetual state of ignorance. We will always be unaware on some level. Um, and yeah. So I don't know. That's what that made me think about. But does anybody have anything else they want to add?
I'll just add, there's a whole lot in the Tao Te Ching that speaks to this idea, and I bring that up as an example of this not being a new thing. I mean, this is really, I think, fundamental to human psychology and in group, out group, tribal, like just how communities have formed that help survival. So that really, humans as a communal animal and how we have been able to adapt to our environment and survive has been through, I think they talk about in the book cognitive, being able to have people who know about medicine, people who know about farming, people who know about art and culture and pass down the stories, or people who are more in touch with the spirit world that help to guide our society. So it's not necessarily a good or bad component, but in the Tao Te Ching, it talks about the master has cured herself of all knowing. To think that presume that one knows, because the world is so vast and complex and there are so many circumstances that one cannot know everything. So the master has healed herself of all knowing. Presuming to know is a disease. And if you want to understand all things, let go of your own beliefs. To be able to separate and to create room for possibility that what you know may not be everything there is to know. And I think when it comes to the modern world, social media, I think, is like we were doing the anxious generation, is really a massive global psychological experiment where we have been put into kind of these polarizing bubbles that only show us content that will affirm our beliefs or what the platform believes our beliefs to be so they can get more clicks. So I think if there's anything that's new in this age, it is the technology that has changed or even further isolated us into belief.
One piece of that reminded me, I was actually just this morning, Alvin, Imhotep, and I were sitting over at Mrs. Fair's, and we were watching this video by this group called Earn Your Leisure. And they were talking about like stocks, and they were also talking about like Facebook and what's Homeboy's name? Mark Zuckerberg. He was talking mad trash about Apple and some of their tech. All that to say is, as we were listening to it, we've been talking a lot about, how can we kind of bridge the gap between, what we know and what community wants to know and things of that nature. And like one piece that I really had to consider in it was like the Earn Your Leisure guys have a very different frame of reference for like what is good and what is not than I do. And the things they appreciate and respect are much more different than things that I appreciate and respect. And it took me having to like consciously tell myself to not dismiss what they're talking about simply because I don't agree. Because at the same time, there's still a lot for me to take away from the conversation that they were having, how they were having the conversation, and to Alvin's point, the possibilities that lie in what's going on in front of me, and how I could apply that myself. And I found myself having to have that conversation with myself a lot because I do tend to be or lean more towards like being judgmental of things when I don't feel like I'm in alignment. And, I'm sure that's been spurred on by, exactly what we're talking about, the confirmation bias and, what I know is right and stuff like that. But yeah, just having to consciously not dismiss people or ideas that I don't agree with simply because I don't agree. Because there's often an air of something to take away. We often say, leave what works I mean, leave what works, take what works and leave the rest, right? And that's kind of what this piece we were talking about just reminded me of. So
Yeah, I was just gonna say like it just made me like I think especially what Alvin mentioned about that piece in the Dow really like affirms that cultural point to me. And I think that like part of what the internet has done is it has like I don't know. This culture is very obsessed with expertise, you know? Um, we like to think that our society is guided by experts, the individual people who know the most about the thing that we're asking them about, and that causes us to become blind to, like Albert Einstein, and this is an example that they use in the book. Einstein didn't discover E equals MC squared all by himself, he was building off of decades and decades and decades of previous research and
And his
ideas.
wife.
Yes, and his wife, it's a community of knowledge, So, but at this, but the narrative that gets told is that it was all him, it was all that one guy, So, um, I think part of that is like examining the assumptions that we're taught to make by our culture about knowledge itself. The idea that there is one right answer to any given question, the idea that there is one person who has the right answer above all others. I don't know. Maybe I might be getting a little abstract with it, but yeah, I think it's it's almost like a trap, you know, because um, you're like, oh, we're all less informed than we think, and yet we still make assumptions about why this other person is coming to this conclusion. You know, like we make assumptions about like, oh, they must not be thinking logically, you know, if they can't see this fact, you know, they must not be as informed as I am because they don't see things this way, you know, when, you know, maybe they are just as informed about a totally different set of circumstances that's causing them to come to a different conclusion, you know. Um, yeah, I'm gonna pass it for now, but I'm gonna see if I can think of an example of that.
Thing that made me think of was, you know, just also how we approach conflict transformation and the importance of both like inquiry and curiosity and also of like critical thinking and being able to poke holes in things. And I say that inquiry piece because, you know, oftentimes when it comes to assumptions, even our own assumptions, right? Uh, Inquiry and curiosity is the way out of it more often than not. So, you know, getting to the heart or the root of why people believe what they believe might not um, might not transform them in the moment, but it at least gives you some room to work through. Okay, this is where they're coming at this particular situation from, and that might even inform how you arrive at that particular situation, rather than making some of those assumptions. So that's what that piece had reminded me of. Anybody on Zoom wanna hop in here? Anything? Thoughts, reflections on maybe some knowledge you had that changed up or switched up because of a situation or an assumption you realized you've been making all your life that you had to stop making?
I can't remember exactly what um those things were, but I just remember having to change how I thought about certain things. Oh, well, one of them was actually when I started doing activism work, I realized that I had a bias against people that were already incarcerated. Um, I noticed that I was like, well, they're there for a reason, and if they're uncomfortable, so what? But then I ended up having a person that taught me that that was wrong and why it was wrong. And um, I'm just grateful that that person decided to spend that time with me to tell me that because they could have just been like, whatever, you know, I don't feel like convincing a person to see another person as human, you know? And and I've had plenty of those moments where I'm just like, I'm not going to sit up here and teach anybody, you know, because it's just it's possibly a waste of time. But this person taught me that sometimes it's not a waste of time. And I'm grateful that they sat with me and told me these things. And also, it was also a documentary that I've seen too. They kind of brought all their knowledge um, together in a way that it made me understand deeper because at first I was on the fence, but I ended up seeing a documentary about people who are in prison and I've seen that they were humanizing them. And I was like, okay, well maybe this is something I should watch and you know and see how I feel after. And it brought everything that he said to a different light because I actually was able to see them as human, like hearing their stories and why they were incarcerated and how that they went on their whole, I guess, redemption road to redemption and tried to change up their lives in prison. Because it was one story in particular that I think the guy ended up committing murder and he was sentenced to basically like the rest of his life in prison. And the things that he did behind bars to support other people and help them see like hey like we're all here for a reason and um maybe if you would, think a little deeper, then you'll be able to not only forgive yourself, you know, but understand, like, just, I guess, like, be a better person, like forgive yourself and become a better person. And the fact that so many people were helped by him, and even in the documentary, he ends up dying in prison, and they had that, like, they actually showed him, like, actually, like, passing away. And that was kind of like a lot. But because it was I didn't expect it at the time. I was just like, okay, what? And but it to see that he was surrounded by other people. He wasn't surrounded by his family, but he was surrounded by people who he's seen as family. And to see that he was so beloved when he passed in the prison, he was just kind of like, whoa, like, it helped me humanize, because I was able to see people, and hear their stories. Because I'm a very big story person, and if I hear a person's story, then to me, that helps me humanize them. And yeah, so and it's one of the things that I was like, I'm really glad that I actually took the time to realize that I was wrong, and I didn't fight back against what I was being taught. I actually sat there and I listened, and I did my own research, and I was able to come to a conclusion that, okay, what I'm thinking is wrong, and I need to change it. And I really feel like if more people did that, I feel like we would be in like a I really do feel like we'll be in a different spot, like, as a whole, as a people. But I just feel like not many people are willing to figure out um why their assumptions are wrong. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think the sometimes the more challenging thing is convincing people that the things that they know are wrong in the first place. You know, sometimes it's hard to get people to understand what they don't understand. But I was gonna ask though, so like along those lines, what was it, Cassandra, about the way that that person approached you that or maybe it was the way that they approached you, maybe it was something that was going on internally with you, but what was it that helped you um accept, like, I guess, like, first you had to accept the possibility that maybe I'm doing something wrong here, and then you had to go and do the research and then conclude, okay, yeah, I've been off the mark, let me adjust. So I'm just curious, yeah, and I think you spoke to it a little bit with the documentary, but I'm wondering if there was anything about the way that that person approached you that helped you kind of like, see the light, for lack of a better word.
Oh, there we go. So the person, it comes to me in like a crazy way. Like, I notice that's how some of us, we kind of get hyped when we hear something that we don't agree with, and we just go into like super activism mode, and just like, hey, that's wrong. And he didn't really come at me in that way. Like, he just was like, hey, yeah, I think the way that you're basically like, hey, I think you should change the way that you're thinking. And he didn't really come off as like, he didn't try to humiliate me for thinking that way. He didn't say, well, you're an activist. Why, how do you think, isn't the way you're supposed to be, and all this, he just basically came into to me as a person and said, hey, um, I don't think that the way that you're thinking about it is not correct. The things that you're thinking is not correct. These are still people too, no matter if they have committed crimes or not, they still have basic human rights. And he also shared that in other prisons in other countries, they treat they treat incarcerated people way better than we do, and the outcomes are a little different. And so I listened to that, and I was just kind of like, because me being a person that I'm just like, I was very big into like, I'm really big into human rights, like basic human rights. And I thought about that, and I was just like, you know what, that even though, he's right, even though that person committed a crime, when do they stop paying for that crime, and when have they, quote unquote, um, paid their debt to society, And then I was just like, and then I started thinking that, like, I believe that everyone can be redeemed, but then it's like, okay, well, if I believe that, then why am I going so hard against people who have been incarcerated? Because if I believe that, then I should believe, So it's just going down that rabbit hole and unraveling things that I've already believed to be true. And he kind of played to those things, because once I shared with him that I was a Christian, he was like, well, what about this and that? And I was like, you know what? He was like, kind of like, this is, what people believe. If you believe that people can be redeemed, you don't want to be, associated with something that you've done and you move past it. And I was like, you know, that makes sense. So that's what kind of made me kind of go down the rabbit hole myself and figure out, like, is something I have been believing to be true not true, or is it, not the it I feel like it's more than truth. It's just like, is it not, um I don't know, I can't find the word, but is it inhumane? Something, the thing that I believe, because believing that a person is just as bad as is just bad, no matter what they do after the fact that they've committed a crime, was just kind of, which today I can realize it was a bit much, but at the time, it was just what I believed. And yeah, so I just feel like if we were able to come back to the point, is I just feel like if people were able to come at people in a not in a accusatory way, but in a way that, um I guess I wouldn't even say even a nice way, but just in a way that people can, not feel humiliated or feel or feel like they're being accused of being a terrible person. I feel like that could help people to want to, hear what you have to say, instead of, instead of like, that's just wrong and that's stupid. So that was my take on it.
I had another question for you. How often had you interacted with or like touched base with incarcerated people before you had that conversation with Homeboy?
Not many. Not, I don't think at all, really. I mean, I've had, younger family members that I went to go visit, when juvenile was a thing. I don't know if that's, I know here it's not a thing. I don't know if it's still there, a thing in, Indiana, but, um I was just kind of like, other than that, like, I've never really talked to anyone that was incarcerated. I never really, I think, yeah, I think, a person in my family ended up going to like a I'm trying to remember. It's like a boot camp. It wasn't like a they didn't they it was kind of like a juvenile, but they call it juvenile. It was like a boy camp or something like that. And I would interact with him, but other than, through like mail, but yeah, other than that, I never even talked to a person that was incarcerated before, really. And not, at least not
Sure.
in jail or prison.
Yeah, right on. The reason why I asked was because, I have I had a similar experience around the time I like first started college. When like around that time, I wouldn't necessarily say I had like, any animosity towards this particular group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sorry, I didn't even speak to which group people it was, but for a long time, like, or at least like in that particular time period, it was when the idea of trans people had just been introduced to me. And the way it had been introduced to me was through a lot of like conservative outlets and rhetoric around like them being mentally ill, even
Mm-hmm.
throwing around like ideas of gender dysmorphia and stuff like that, like as a psychological issue, like bipolar disorder or like things of that nature. And so like I never had any like like I said, I never had like any animosity towards this particular group just because, I don't have animosity towards bipolar people. Like, it's like, damn, that sucks, bro. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the impression I
Mhm.
had of it. And it took me getting into college and actually interacting with that group of people. So I was like talking to a group of friends about it, and this woman came up to me, and she's like, "That's not how that shit works at all," and this is how blah blah, and this is how trans people actually feel, and it was just like, damn, I've been led astray. And it reminded me of that
Mhm.
particular situation because, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, where I feel like you gotta have experience in your body. And like I've been reading this book called Schools That Learn by Peter Senge and a bunch of other authors. He wrote one of the systems thinking Bibles, the Fifth Discipline. And in this book, they're talking about how school works and stuff like that. And he talks about how, and even in Ancient Generation, a lot of books he read about like early childhood development and just human beings in general speak to the fact that like knowledge is carried in your body and is expressed through the embodiment of things you're doing. So, you know, you might not really know how to play a guitar until you put your fingers to one, right? Like even right now, I can't necessarily, I can play songs on guitar, but I can't like sit here and do it, right here with my hands because I need the guitar in it, right? Um, and so like that piece around like knowledge being embodied and expressed through our actions has me thinking like that might be one of the biggest reasons why people are able to be as biased as they are about certain, I guess certain groups in this instance, but um, we're just like very isolated as a people and as a group and as a community. I feel oftentimes. And I think that degree of separation, even if you think of something like race, right, where black and white communities are more segregated now than they were shit when Mrs. Fair was in high school. You know what I mean? So I look at things like that and I wonder if it's that lack of firsthand experience that forces you to move into the utility mindset that generates the possibility of change there. So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
I was also going to ask, how well or how familiar were you with the person that, approached you with this alternative way of viewing things? Like, how close was your relationship?
Um, I feel like we just kind of met. I feel like I met them um before we had the conversation. I think we've known each other for about a month, maybe two.
Okay.
But I trusted this person because I noticed that this person uh, has done more things as pertains to activism than I did.
Mhm.
Um, and my thing was also that me being new, I might think that Black Lives Matter, but it's like, okay, I feel like they were like, okay, there's another world. I mean, there's other, I won't say another world, but there's more to activism. Like, there's more
Hmm.
oppressed people. And he was like, kind of like, well, Black people are in prison. And you can't just, if you're saying that all Black lives matter, it can't just be the ones that haven't committed crimes, And that kind of sat with me too.
Yeah.
So, I was able to trust him a little bit more because we has marched together and we've been through hair situations together. And I noticed that like when he speaks, like like other things were true. And I was just, learning these things. So um we didn't know each other long, but at the same time, he was a person that I trusted with not
Mhm.
with factual knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I think, the reason I asked that because, I heard, I heard a few things basically in sort of like your original explanation. I heard that like they approached you in a way that didn't make you feel attacked or inferior, which made you more open to receiving this new information. I heard that they sort of, approached the issue in a way that allowed you to, you know, see the inconsistencies in your own logic. But I think that piece about trust is also really important because sometimes it's like whether or not the information is like good or correct is sometimes less important than, you know, do I trust where this information is coming from? Um, or yeah, or like Jay Root said, or how the information even makes you feel. And I think that that makes me think of two things from the book. One is just this, going back to the point that Alvin made about the community of knowledge, the idea that, other people shape not only how we feel about knowledge, but what knowledge we have access to. Like not only would you like not have known these things if you hadn't, been in relationship with this person, but if it hadn't been this person, would you have even been able to receive that information, And then the other thing I think it makes me think about, which is related to that, is like, credibility. What makes a source of information trustworthy, and I think like you said, sometimes it's seeing the other person do the thing really well, so like, oh, this person can get all this stuff done, they know what they're talking about. Sometimes it's about like, oh, the other people in my community look at this source and they believe it, so it must be correct, it must have credibility. Um, and then I think sometimes it does have to do with like, personal relationship as well. It's just like, do I feel like you're somebody who would mislead me? A lot of the time it's no, but then a lot of the time it's yes. So yeah, so yeah, I just thought that that was very interesting because, I think that a lot of the time we focus a lot on the information itself and think the information is what people aren't connecting with or understanding, but sometimes it's the source of the information that that determines whether or not it does or doesn't have an impact. So
I
yeah.
would also add to what you said. I feel like as much as people like to believe that most people are rational decision makers, I would argue that most people are emotional decision makers, and a
I'm
lot
super
of,
rational.
except for J. Rue, and that a lot of times it's actually about like, do I like this person? Do they make me feel comfortable? Do I connect with them on a personal level? Is this someone I want to hang around because I enjoy their company?
Is that non-rational or rational?
Um, I would say if the idea is how trustworthy is their information and the decision is based off how I like them, I would say that's not rational.
And I'll add, and this is kind of in the lines with Mimi. Like I think the book also speaks to this, is that we really don't think in information and facts. We think in stories, cause and effect. When I touched the stove when I was a little kid, I burnt my hand. I got this little scar. I know that is imprinted in my memory deeply.
Yeah, like you're not thinking about like heat transfer and thermodynamics and the sensitivities of the nervous system. You're thinking about your experience.
Yeah, and
So
the
let
same
me
with
ask.
Cassandra's story. So the story about seeing the documentary, and even documentaries or books or people in our family, that emotional connection, because I do think humans also have a tendency to empathy as social beings beyond just our information, to see through others' eyes, whether that's a personal story, I think is most impactful. But I think it can even be stories like, for instance, Born in Blackness really is a story of the 1400s to now, and really to me shattered a lot of my worldviews and changed a lot of worldviews. I had vague ideas of, oh yes, like governments, corporations, like they've done bad things and racism exists, and but really understanding the story, I think changed my perspective on on a deeper level. Yeah. Go ahead, Em.
Um, not nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was gonna say on the point of storytelling because yeah, I think that is some, um, they talk about the term that they use in the book is like they talk about diagnostic reasoning. What does that mean? And it's basically the idea that we take the information available to us, make calculations and conclusions based off of that, and that's what we roll with. So sometimes it takes additional information to broaden your scope, but sometimes it's about the way that that information is presented, the way that the connections are drawn, so like uh um for example, the story of the Black Plague is that like all of Europe thought that the Jewish people were responsible for the plague because they were the only ones who didn't get it. And the only information that they have is we're all sick, they're not, they must be doing this to us. But when you add the context of, well, a lot of the people in the places that are getting sick don't have a super robust hygiene practice, and a lot of the the places that aren't getting sick do have a more robust hygiene practice. Then that is a story that allows you to draw some different conclusions. Take a bath for one. So yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of that because I thought that piece around like diagnostic reasoning was one of the more interesting parts of the book in the very beginning, where he speaks like that's something that separates us from basically every other animal on Earth is our ability to think back to front, if that makes sense. So like other animals what allow them to exist, and us included, is the ability to link cause and effect. So, they were studying how like dogs can have learned helplessness if they because some they like tested them and like they gave them electric shocks. If they didn't cross over a border, then they gave them an electric shock. And some of them they just gave an electric shock no matter what they did. And eventually those animals like started to associate like, okay, if I do X, then I'm gonna get shocked. If I do, but some of them, it's like no matter what you do, you're gonna get shocked, and they would just sit there and take it, and that sucks. Or even like, man, I'm trying to think of the other example that he gave. But basically, like animals are able to associate, like, okay, this happened because of that. But we're able to say, um, this is happening why like we can see the like, oh, the computer isn't working, well let me run through this. I might have to turn it on and turn it back off, or turn it off and turn it back on. I might have to get a new driver, or they can run down the list of like what might be going wrong and like fix it, and other animals cannot create that list for themselves. So I guess no big like conclusion or takeaway from that, but just thought that was like an interesting way to view like us in relation to other animals. Because I think like oftentimes we're like, oh, well, some people are like, oh, human beings are like outside of the animal kingdom. Some people are like, oh, human beings are just another animal, which I'm more in that camp. But it is cool to think about like what allows us to have the kind of intelligence that we have. So.
That example
So-called
about
intelligence.
so-called exactly. That question about the computer, that example about the computer, I think, gives me a question for Khalid that I think might help us like understand this a little better. You'll be all right, but like, Khalid, you're a bit of a technology guy, so like, say that you're trying to uh, I don't know. I'm not going to give you a specific example, but say you're trying to do something on your computer with your video game system and you can't figure out how to do what you're trying to do. How do you typically go about like, solving that problem? Like what do you do to figure out what you're trying to figure out?
I either just leave the game. If I don't do that, then I check the internet. But usually my game is fast enough to tell me that the internet's not working, so those conclusions usually come up. But if it does, like if I'm on a different device like my PC, um, so I check the internet, and then if I don't check the internet, I reset the game. And that's not the case. Uh, I like search up, mm, like I search up like I go on like Instagram, like TikTok, see like, because most people like one time Xbox servers were shut down and like everyone was making memes and posting about it, and like it was like 10 minutes after, so like I probably search up if that's what's happening, like is this game down for everyone else? If those don't work, I'd probably just get off.
Yeah, no, and thank you. I think that's exactly what you said exactly what I was hoping that you would say, which is just like this idea that like, to Jeru's point, what separates us from most other animals, because apparently, yeah, like apparently orcas and crows do this, but like we can consult each other, we consult each other's experiences, like, hey, is anybody else having this problem? Yes, great. How did you fix it? Um, can we work on this together? Can we address this problem? It goes back to this idea of like our human knowledge as our like main evolutionary like superpower, if you want to call it that, and just the idea that our knowledge being shared is what allows us to, we couldn't problem solve the way that we problem solve on our own. We have Wikipedia and WikiHow and your granddad, like yeah, yeah.
And I will say, yeah, I'll say I see it's 7:30. I'm not sure how long we're gonna keep it going. Um, but just like in general, appreciate the conversation we've had and appreciate you, Cassandra, for coming through. I think your experiences were spot on in terms of just, what we've been reading and also experiencing ourselves. And I will say one last thing, and just like this book really made me feel a sense of like freedom in my ignorance. Uh, because it's just like so profound how like we are able to, create these communities of knowledge. I'm very thankful for that, but also to be able to recognize that no matter what we do and no matter what we create, there is always going to be more to learn. And there will always be things that we cannot perceive. So like even our human intelligence, I think about like other animals who see in, we see it, I think like 8 color spectrum or something like that. There are some animals out there that see in 12. There are some animals that can see in the dark, that can see UV, that can see heat. There are some animals that are like small on a microscopic level, and just like to know that the things that they experience, and I'm sure like beings and entities out there in the vast universe experience that I will never have any ability to like perceive myself. Just like reminds me that the world is a very big place and the universe is a very big place. And yeah, there's just like a freedom to that, that idea that ignorance is bliss, and goddamn, I'm always going to be ignorant no matter how much I learn. And the more I learn, the less I really know. So it's a cool feeling, at least to me. It's a cool feeling.
Yeah, maybe that's some, I feel like, and I guess I'll just try to do a little bit of summarization of the conversation tonight right now. But I think, we've talked a lot about the illusion of knowledge itself. I think we've like really dug into this idea that we don't always know as much as we think we do. It's not always as easy to make people realize that. It's not all. It's very difficult to, get people to accept knowledge and information that is outside of the scope of what they're familiar with and what they're comfortable with. So maybe when we come back in 2 weeks, which will be it is the 15th today. 15th. Yeah, so we'll be back to continue the discussion on the 29th. So maybe we can continue the conversation more along the lines of, what does it mean to live in a community of knowledge? Okay, so we know that humans are mostly ignorant. We know that, it's really hard to change our minds, so what does it mean? So what does that mean? What does it mean to be smart if all knowledge is shared knowledge, and how do we, use that ignorance, more as an advantage than a disadvantage. So yeah, unless anybody has anything else that they want to add or contribute before we get out of here, I say, yeah, let's call it here for today. Anybody else on the Zoom wanna add anything? All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening and contributing. Special thanks to Cassandra for giving us that excellent example of just like, a time when, their knowledge has been expanded and changed and letting us dig into that a little bit. If you want to support this book discussion and the other book discussions like it, visit donate.kepler.org and leave us a nice, generous donation. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the 29th for the part 2 of this discussion of the knowledge illusion.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, Cass, for being our feature presenter.
No problem,
Yeah.
y'all. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Good night, y'all.
Bye.